For 2 decades, the little cabin on the edge of Willow Creek stood still, like a forgotten memory. It was the kind of place that looked like it belonged to a story long finished, shingles missing, chimney crumbling, a porch swing that creaked in the wind, but never with company. Inside lived Walter Briggs, 72, a man most townsfolk referred to as the ghost of Maple County. He wasn't dead, of course, just invisible. He had made himself that way. And he liked it just fine, or so he told himself. Walter hadn't always been alone. Once, he had a laugh that filled rooms, a wife who loved tulips, and a daughter who called him her hero. But tragedy doesn't knock, it barges in. A drunk driver ended their story on a rainy night 20 years ago. After the funeral, Walter packed up his world and drove until the road ended, literally, at the edge of the woods. He hadn't really lived since. He kept time by the seasons, not calendars. He fished in the mornings, fixed radios for no one in particular, and avoided town unless supplies ran dangerously low. Conversations were limited to the old radio and the occasional squirrel that scurried across his porch. And in all these years, not one soul had dared cross that weathered gate. Until the storm came. It was the kind of storm that made even the trees seem afraid. The wind howled like it carried secrets, and rain poured in heavy sheets, swallowing everything in gray. Walter was settling in with a bowl of soup and the familiar hum of his fireplace when he heard it, a knock. Once. Then again, firmer. His heart jumped in a way it hadn't in years. No one came here. No one should. He opened the door slowly, and there she stood, drenched, shivering, holding a broken umbrella in one hand and a small suitcase in the other. She looked no younger than 65, but her eyes, those sad, searching eyes, carried a lifetime of stormy nights. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, voice trembling. "My car broke down, no cell service. I didn't know where else to go." Walter stared for a moment longer than he should have. Part of him wanted to send her away. That's what he did. Kept people out. Pain out. But something about her, maybe it was the way she clutched her bag like it held her whole life, made him step aside. "Come in," he said, voice hoarse from years of silence. She introduced herself as Miriam Hayes, recently widowed. She and her husband used to drive this road often, she said, especially in autumn. He loved the leaves, she smiled faintly, and I loved watching him love them. Walter handed her a dry towel and warmed up her soup. They didn't talk much that first night, but there was a quiet comfort in the way she sat near the fire, as if she belonged there. By morning, the storm had passed, but Miriam stayed. At first, just for tea. Then for lunch. Then another night, because her car still wasn't fixed, and honestly, she didn't seem in a rush. Walter never asked why. He didn't want to scare away the first flicker of warmth that had entered his world in 2 decades. Over the next few days, something remarkable began to happen. Walter found himself listening to her stories about her late husband, their garden, the grandkids who lived too far. He even chuckled once, genuinely, when she told him how she once got locked in a chicken coop trying to save an injured bird. In return, he told her about his daughter, Emily, and the tulips she planted every spring. He told her about the accident, his silence, and how he'd punished the world by disappearing. "I thought if I hurt alone, no one else would get hurt," he whispered one night. Miriam didn't say much. She just reached out and gently placed her hand over his. That simple gesture did what no words could, it cracked the walls he'd built with grief. On the 5th day, she asked if he'd walk with her. It had been years since Walter stepped beyond the trees. But he did. They strolled through fallen leaves, golden and rust-colored, and stopped by the lake. "It's beautiful," she said, "but lonely." He nodded. "Like me." She turned to him, eyes glistening. "It doesn't have to be." That night, Walter sat up long after Miriam had gone to bed. He stared at the fireplace and thought about Emily. About the life he buried with her. And about the stranger who walked into his darkness like she'd known the way all along. The next morning, Miriam stood at the door with her suitcase packed. Her car had been towed and repaired. She smiled, but it was the kind of smile people wear when they're trying not to cry. "Well, I guess this is goodbye," she said softly. "Thank you for your kindness." Walter's chest tightened. He wanted to say something, anything, but the word stuck. She took a step onto the porch. "Wait," he finally said. "Stay." She turned, surprised. "I mean, if you want. I have a lot of soup left," he chuckled nervously. She laughed, the kind of laugh that makes everything okay for a second. "You sure?" He nodded. "For the first time in years, I think I am." Miriam moved in slowly, not all at once. She brought color into the cabin, literally, curtains, wildflowers, cinnamon in the coffee. Walter found himself humming again. He even dusted off Emily's old piano. And when spring came, they planted tulips together. But perhaps the most unexpected moment came when Walter walked into town, hand in hand with Miriam, to attend the church Easter service. Heads turned. People whispered. But Walter smiled. Let them talk. He was no longer the ghost of Maple County. During the community potluck, a little girl with pigtails tugged at his sleeve. "Mister, are you the man who lives in the woods?" Walter knelt to her level. "I used to be. Not anymore." And that was true. Because when you open your door, even in a storm, you just might find what your heart has been aching for. Walter had lived alone for 20 years. But it took one widow, one stormy night, and one simple act of kindness to remind him, it's never too late to start living again. And sometimes, the people we least expect can walk in and rescue us, from ourselves.